Hey guys, what's going on? Darren here, and welcome back to the preview and prediction series. This is a series where I'll be previewing and then giving my predictions for the upcoming Grand Prix, and this time I'll be doing it for the United States Grand Prix at the Circuit of the Americas as F1 makes its second trip to the States this season. If you do enjoy this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. I try to release at least 3 videos every week, and I look forward to reading and responding to your predictions down below. Before we get into the preview and predictions for the United States Grand Prix, let's first take a look back at the Japanese Grand Prix, and I feel like I need to get this out of the way at first. The FIA and the full wet tyres are a complete shambles at the moment. Firstly, the wets. What is the point in the tyre? The race should have been started on wets, but they opted to start on intermediates, and then when they did get restarted, the intermediate tyres were instantaneously faster than the wet tyres, rendering them pretty much useless. A rumour is that no one is happy with Pirelli's wet tyre, and if that's the case, then I feel like there needs to be some tests conducted by the teams to try and improve the tyres in test sessions. Then there is the FIA. What on earth were they doing? Putting a tractor on track on a very full wet track when all the cars were not collected by the safety car. Sticking a tractor on the track would be much better if it was dry and all the cars were behind the safety car, but in those conditions there is absolutely no excuse for putting a tractor on track and not red flagging the race instantaneously. And finally, there's also the ending of the race. So let me get this straight. If there is a 2-hour and 40-minute delay, but they reach a checkered flag after doing only 20 minutes of racing, then they will still get full points. But if they only do 20 minutes of running and then have a 2-hour and 40-minute red flag, then they will only get a few points. It just doesn't make much sense to me, and that is something that I think the FIA will need to fix for next season. Now to the race itself. As mentioned before, the race started under incredibly wet conditions, but all 20 drivers were on the intermediate tyres, which were clearly the wrong choice, as Zhou Guanyu spun very quickly, and then Carlos Sainz aquaplaned off and hit the wall, and then Gasly, who couldn't see a thing, smashed into an advertising board which came onto track after Sainz's crash. The safety car was then deployed after this, and as mentioned, a tractor came onto track. Gasly flew past the tractor, which was also incredibly stupid, and landed himself a fully deserved drive-through penalty post-race. Driving high speed past the crash zone, which he was involved in, was very silly in my opinion, and hence why the penalty was fully deserved. After a while, the race got restarted, and in the race, Vettel and Latifi pitted almost instantaneously for intermediate tyres, and this worked perfectly for them, unlike the Haas of Mick Schumacher, who decided to stay out on full wets, and for me, it was a risk worth taking for the team. However, it did backfire incredibly, and he was literally like 8 seconds off the pace. Verstappen and Leclerc, who quickly stopped for intermediates as well, they flew past Mick Schumacher, and then during the race itself, Max ran away into the distance. And why was this? The reason for this was because Charles Leclerc and Ferrari were very hard on their intermediate tyres, which can be seen in this photo here. Leclerc's tyre by the end is almost completely bald versus Verstappen's, which still has a decent amount of tread on the tyre. Leclerc was struggling in the long run and fell 25 seconds behind Verstappen at the end of the race. And that was after only 26 laps of racing. It was a very short Grand Prix. And in the last lap, he locked up going into the final chicane, and that landed him a 5-second penalty, which meant that he actually finished behind Sergio Perez in Grand Prix, which means that, for once, my predictions for the Japanese Grand Prix was correct. And not only that, Max Verstappen won his second World Championship in probably the most underwhelming way possible. The race itself is worth a watch, however, please do be sure to skip the very long red flag period, and also don't try to figure out how the race was worth full points because it just doesn't make any sense. Now to the United States preview, and for me, this is one of the finest modern circuits on the calendar. There are almost always good races with a lot of overtakes, and there can always be a variety of strategies leading to anything happening during the race. There are 2 DRS zones, and the main overtaking spots is at the end of each DRS zone, going into turn 1, and then at the end of the very long straight. The race distance for the Grand Prix is 56 laps, and the fastest ever lap is a 1:32.029 set by Valtteri Bottas in the Mercedes in the 29 Grand Prix, and the race lap record is a 1:36.109 by Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, also during the 2019 Grand Prix. During last season's Grand Prix, there was a total of 32 on-track overtakes and also 49 pit stops, which is to be expected around Texas due to the number of high-speed corners putting a lot of load through the tyres. And speaking of the tyres, Pirelli will be taking the C2, C3 and C4 compound tyre, similar to how they did last season. And with this in mind, I think we will see a mixture of 2 and 3 stop strategies during the race, given that in general, there was less stops last season, but still everyone was on the 2 stop at this race, which means that gives me confidence that we will see 2 to 3 stops this season around COTA. Now to the top 3 teams, and firstly, let's start with Red Bull. The Japanese Grand Prix for me was the perfect place for Red Bull and Max Verstappen to win his second World Championship, and also it was the perfect place for them to get a 1-2 finish. I think if the race went on a little bit longer at Suzuka, they would have definitely finished 1-2, regardless of the fact that the race was cut short. And the reason for this is because Red Bull has superior tyre wear in the wet, which is interesting because if you think back to earlier in the season, Ferrari actually had better tyre wear than the Red Bull team for a long period. This weekend, I expect another strong showing from the 2-time world champion, given that he typically goes well in Texas, and this circuit should suit their car perfectly, especially if it's as bumpy as it usually is. Next up is Ferrari, and they had a bit of a shocking weekend in Suzuka. Carlos Sainz's race lasted all of half a lap before he aquaplaned off heavily into the wall. And for Charles Leclerc, well, he lost the fight in the championship to Verstappen, so yeah, he definitely had a bad race. Ferrari after the race though will be left with more questions than answers. It was a very tricky Grand Prix for them, and they were terrible on the tyre wear, and the long run pace of the Scuderia is seemingly off at every single racetrack now versus earlier in the season. Given that I expect Texas will be a multi-stop race, I can see another tricky weekend for the team in red, as it feels like they are falling further and further behind the Red Bulls with each passing race. And also, if it's a multi-stop race, we need to hope that their strategy team is actually awake and not asleep like they normally are. Finally, we come to Mercedes. Mercedes had a weird Japanese Grand Prix, and we've not really spoken about them, but overall, it was a pretty poor race for them. In the dry, they were pretty slow as they opted to increase the amount of downforce that they were running, and the car in general is pretty slow in a straight line, so increasing the downforce is going to make it even worse for them. That being said, even though they increased the downforce, they were not really any faster through the corners versus Red Bull or Ferrari, and that was in the dry. And then in the wet, Hamilton was stuck behind the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, and the Alpine, typically being one of the faster cars in a straight line, meant that without any DRS, Hamilton had no hope of overtaking Ocon. Texas should be a better weekend for them though, I feel. That is, if the bumps in the circuit have been dealt with. If they have not and the circuit is still incredibly bumpy, then this could be a tough race for the Silver Arrows, as they typically struggle over bumpy circuits. That being said though, if the bumps are actually gone, I do think we could see a Silver Arrow on the podium this weekend. And now to my predictions, and for pole position, I'm going to go for Max Verstappen. Car and driver are working perfectly as one, and there is no reason why this will not continue going into this race. They seem to be pulling further and further ahead from the Ferraris with each passing race. And in the race itself, I'm going to go for Max Verstappen to win the Grand Prix, with Lewis Hamilton to finish in second place and Sergio Perez to round off the podium. And for the top midfield team, I'm going to go with Alpine, as they seem to have clearly pulled ahead of McLaren now. But that is what I think. The question is though, guys, what do you think? Who do you think will be on pole position? And who do you think will win the United States Grand Prix? Let me know down below as I read and respond to every single comment. And of course, as always, comment, leave a like, and if you haven't already, of course, subscribe to the channel for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.